When my ex-father-in-law from my past steps through the door, everything I thought I knew about forgiveness, family, and strength begins to change. 9 years after my husband walked out, I built a new life, a thriving business, a loving son, and hard-earned peace. Before we begin the story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's free, and it truly helps support this channel. The morning rush had finally settled into a gentle hum. I wiped down the espresso machine and glanced around my cafe, taking in the warm light filtering through the front windows. Every table was occupied. The scent of fresh cinnamon rolls filled the air. This place was mine. I'd built it from nothing. "Mom, can you help me with this math problem?" Max looked up from his homework at the corner table, his pencil hovering over the page. I walked over and ruffled his dark hair. "Sweetheart, let me see." He was 11 now, tall for his age, with his father's eyes but none of his restlessness. Max had grown up in this cafe. He'd learned to read at that very table. He knew every regular customer by name. An older woman called from near the window. "Hannah, your latte is perfect as always." Mrs. Bailey came in every Tuesday and Thursday without fail. "Thank you so much, Mrs. Bailey." I smiled at her. "I'm glad you enjoyed it." Jen, my employee, bounced over with an empty tray. She was 24, cheerful, and sharp as a tack. "Hannah, table 5 wants to know if we're doing the strawberry scones tomorrow." "Tell them yes. Double batch." "You're a legend." Jen grinned and headed back to the counter. I felt proud. Not the loud, boastful kind. The quiet kind that settles in your chest and stays there. 9 years ago, I had nothing. A failed marriage. A toddler. No money. No plan. Now I have a thriving cafe, loyal customers, a son who feels safe and loved, and my boyfriend Daniel who is patient, steady, and loving Max as if he were his own. The bell above the door chimed. I looked up and froze. An older man stood in the doorway. He wore a gray coat that had seen better days. His hair was white and thin. His shoulders sagged forward. But I recognized his face immediately. Arthur Winslow. My ex-father-in-law. My breath caught. I hadn't seen Arthur in 9 years. Not since the divorce. He spotted me and hesitated. His expression was careful, almost apologetic. He looked so different from the confident, generous man I remembered. This Arthur looked tired. Burdened. Worn down by something I couldn't name. Max glanced up from his homework. "Mom? You okay?" I forced a smile. "I'm fine, honey. Keep working." Arthur walked toward me slowly. His hands were in his pockets. He stopped a few feet away and cleared his throat. "Hannah," Arthur said quietly. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Arthur?" My voice came out steadier than I expected. "This is a surprise." He nodded. His eyes moved around the cafe, taking in the polished counters, the full tables, the warm atmosphere. Something shifted in his expression. Pride, maybe. Or admiration. "You've built something wonderful here," Arthur said. His voice cracked slightly. "Helen would have been so proud of you." Helen. His wife. My ex-mother-in-law. I hadn't thought about her in years. "Thank you," I managed. Arthur's gaze drifted to Max, who was watching us with curious eyes. The boy didn't know who this man was. How could he? Max had been only 2 when Peter and I divorced. He had no memory of his father's family. Something passed over Arthur's face. Longing. Regret. Love. It was gone in a moment, but I saw it clearly. "I won't take much of your time," Arthur said. He shifted his weight. "I just wanted to see how you were doing." There was more he wasn't saying. I could feel it in the air between us. Arthur had always been kind to me, even when Peter wasn't. But 9 years of silence couldn't be explained away with a simple visit. "Are you okay?" I asked. The words came out before I could stop them. Arthur's smile was sad. "I'm managing." He didn't look like he was managing. He looked like a man carrying a secret too heavy to bear. "It was good to see you, Hannah." Arthur glanced once more at Max, then turned toward the door. "Arthur, wait." But he was already gone. The bell chimed again. I stood there, staring at the empty doorway, my heart pounding with questions I couldn't answer. I couldn't focus the rest of the day. Arthur's visit had shaken something loose inside me. Memories I'd buried years ago kept surfacing. His face. That tired, guilty look in his eyes. The way he'd stared at Max. Why now? Why after 9 years? Jen noticed my distraction. "You've wiped that same spot on the counter like 6 times, she said gently. "Everything okay?" "Just thinking." I set down the cloth. "About that older guy who came in." I nodded. Jen was observant. She didn't miss much. "Old family?" Jen asked. "Something like that." She didn't push. That was one of the reasons I loved working with her. Jen knew when to talk and when to let silence do the work. By late afternoon, the cafe had emptied out. Max finished his homework and helped me stack chairs. He was quiet too, which wasn't like him. "Mom?" Max said finally. "Who was that man today?" I paused. How much should I tell him? Max knew his father existed but had no relationship with Peter. Peter had walked away when Max was 3. He'd stopped paying child support a year later. I'd never asked him for a dime after that. I didn't want Peter's money. I didn't want anything from him. But Arthur was different. Arthur had been good to me. Kind? Supportive. Until he disappeared along with the rest of Peter's family. "He's someone I used to know," I said carefully. "A long time ago." Max studied my face. He seemed sad. "Yes. He did. Do you think he's okay?" My son had a gentle heart. He worried about people, even strangers. It was one of the things I loved most about him. "Sweetheart, I don't know," I admitted. "But that was kind of you to notice." Max nodded and went back to stacking chairs. I watched him work, my chest tight with emotion. Arthur had looked at Max the way a grandfather looks at his grandson. With longing. With love. With regret for all the lost years. That night, after I put Max to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. I thought about Arthur. About Helen. About the people they used to be. Arthur had been a successful businessman. He and Helen had owned a beautiful restaurant downtown. They'd been confident, generous, warm. When Peter and I got married, they welcomed me like a daughter. Helen used to bring me soup when I was pregnant. Arthur used to joke about teaching his future grandson how to cook. But Peter had ruined everything. His affair. His lies. His complete disinterest in being a father. The divorce had been brutal. I'd expected Arthur and Helen to side with their son. Most families did. Instead, they'd been kind. Almost too kind. Arthur had told me I deserved better. Helen had cried and hugged me. They'd said they'd always be there for Max. Then nothing. 9 years of silence. I'd assumed they were ashamed. Or angry? Or simply loyal to Peter above all else. I'd made peace with it. I'd moved on. I'd built this life without them. But today, Arthur hadn't looked angry. He'd looked broken. And when he said Helen would have been proud of me, his voice had carried something I couldn't quite place. Guilt, maybe. Or sorrow. I finished my tea and washed the cup. Tomorrow I'd open the cafe again. I'd make coffee and serve pastries and chat with customers. Life would go on. But Arthur's visit had planted a seed of doubt in my mind. There was something he hadn't told me. Something important. And part of me, the part that still remembered his kindness, wanted to know what it was. Max wandered into the kitchen in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes. Can't sleep? Just thinking about tomorrow, I lied. He hugged me. Night, Mom. Good night, sweetheart. I watched him shuffle back to his room. Whatever Arthur was hiding, whatever brought him to my cafe after all these years, I had a feeling I'd find out soon enough. 3 weeks passed before I heard anything about Arthur again. Life returned to its normal rhythm. The cafe stayed busy. Max did well in school. I tried not to think about that unexpected visit. But I did think about it. Late at night, when the house was quiet, I'd remember Arthur's face. That guilt in his eyes. The way he looked at Max with such longing. Next day, I had a meeting scheduled with my business sponsor. His name was Raymond Fuller, and he'd helped me open the cafe 9 years ago. I'd been meeting with Raymond quarterly ever since, discussing finances and growth strategies. Lately, we'd been talking about opening a second location. Raymond arrived at the cafe on a Wednesday morning. He was in his 60s, well dressed, always professional. We sat at a corner table with spreadsheets and coffee. "Hannah, the numbers look excellent," Raymond said. He tapped his pen against the paper. "You're more than ready for a second cafe. The bank will approve the loan without hesitation." That's wonderful news. I felt a flutter of excitement. A second cafe. It seemed impossible 9 years ago. Now it was within reach. Raymond studied me over his reading glasses. "You seem distracted today." I hesitated. Then I told him about Arthur's visit. How strange it had been. How different Arthur looked. Raymond's expression changed. He set down his pen slowly. "Hannah, I need to tell you something," Raymond said. His voice was serious. "Something I probably should have told you years ago." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" "Arthur Winslow came to see me about 3 weeks ago. Before he visited you." I stared at him. "Why?" Raymond took a deep breath. "He wanted to know how you were doing. If the cafe was successful. If you and Max were okay. I don't understand. Hannah, Arthur lost everything. Raymond's voice was gentle. His restaurant. His savings. His home. Peter destroyed it all. The words hit me like cold water. What? Raymond explained it carefully. After my divorce, Peter had gotten involved in the family restaurant business. He'd made reckless investments. Spent money on himself and his girlfriends. Used the restaurant's funds like his personal bank account. Arthur and Helen tried to stop him, Raymond continued. But Peter had access to the accounts. By the time they realized how bad it was, the damage was done. The restaurant went bankrupt. They lost their house. They moved into a small apartment. I felt dizzy. When did this happen? About 6 years ago. And Helen? Raymond's face softened with sympathy. The stress was too much. She got sick. She died 3 years ago. Arthur's been living alone since then. Barely getting by. Tears stung my eyes. Helen. Kind, generous Helen. She died thinking her son had ruined everything. And Arthur had been suffering alone all this time. There's something else I have to tell you, Raymond said quietly. The money I gave you to start this cafe. It wasn't from my company. I looked up sharply. What do you mean? It came from Arthur and Helen. All $250,000. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the table. That's impossible, I whispered. I was told it was a business investment. You said your company sponsored small businesses. I know what I said. Arthur asked me to lie. Raymond looked uncomfortable. He and Helen wanted to help you. They felt guilty about what Peter had done. But they thought you'd refuse if you knew the money came from them. So they hid it? They wanted you to have a fresh start. Away from the Winslow name. Away from the pain Peter caused. Raymond paused. Hannah, they used their personal savings to help you. Before Peter destroyed the rest. I couldn't speak. My throat was tight. My hands were shaking. Arthur and Helen had given me a future. And I thought they abandoned me. I thought they chose Peter over Max and me. I'd spent 9 years believing they didn't care. Arthur made me promise never to tell you, Raymond said. But when he came to see me last month, he looked so broken. I think he wanted to reach out to you but didn't know how. He was afraid you and Max would hate him for staying away. I could never hate him, I managed. I know. But Arthur doesn't know that. He thinks he failed you. I wiped my eyes. My successful cafe. My independence. My pride in building something from nothing. It had all been possible because of Arthur and Helen's sacrifice. I need to find him, I said. I need to thank him. Raymond nodded. I thought you might say that. Raymond didn't have Arthur's current phone number. Neither did I. Arthur had moved after losing his house, and apparently he'd changed his contact information. Try the family lawyer, Raymond suggested. The Winslows used the same law firm for years. Someone there might know how to reach him. I called the law office that afternoon. A woman answered, professional and polite. I explained who I was and why I needed to contact Arthur Winslow. Let me check our records, she said. Can I call you back? Please. It's important. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was the lawyer's office. "Ms. Mercer, I found Arthur Winslow's number," the woman said. "I wasn't sure if I should give it to you directly, so I called him first. He said it's fine to share it with you." My heart pounded. "Thank you. Thank you so much." She gave me the number. I wrote it down with trembling hands. That evening, after Max went to bed, I sat on my couch and stared at my phone. What would I say? How do you thank someone for saving your life when they think they failed you? I dialed before I could lose my nerve. Arthur answered on the third ring. "Hello? Arthur, it's Hannah." Silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. "Hannah? I didn't expect this. Can you come to the cafe tomorrow morning?" I interrupted gently. "Around 9. Max will be at school. We can talk." Another pause. "Yes. I can do that. Thank you, Arthur." "Hannah, I mean." His voice cracked. "I'm sorry I stayed away so long." "We'll talk tomorrow," I said softly. "Please come." The next morning, I arrived at the cafe early. I made fresh coffee and set out pastries. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Jen noticed immediately when she came in for her shift. "Big day?" Jen asked. "Something like that." At 9 o'clock exactly, Arthur walked through the door. He looked nervous. Older somehow. But when he saw me, something in his face eased. I locked the cafe door and flipped the sign to closed. Jen raised her eyebrows but didn't ask questions. She went to the back to prep for the lunch rush. Arthur and I sat at the same corner table where I'd met with Raymond. "I talked to Raymond Fuller," I said without preamble. "He told me everything." Arthur's face went pale. "Oh? No. The money for my cafe. It came from you and Helen." Arthur closed his eyes. "He promised he wouldn't tell you." "I'm glad he did." My voice was steady now. Calm. "Arthur, why didn't you tell me?" Arthur opened his eyes. They were wet with unshed tears. "Helen and I felt so guilty," Arthur said quietly. "Our son destroyed your marriage. He abandoned his child. We raised him to be better than that, and he turned into someone we barely recognized. We wanted to help you, but we thought you'd be happier without any connection to the Winslow family. So you gave me $250,000 and disappeared? We wanted you to feel independent. Proud. We didn't want you to think you owed us anything." Arthur's voice broke. "We wanted you to be free." I reached across the table and took his hand. It was thin and cold. "Arthur, you gave me everything. You and Helen gave me my life back. This cafe, Max's stability, our home, all of it exists because of you. Hannah, you did the work. You built this place. You raised Max into a good boy. That was all you. But I couldn't have done it without your help." Tears streamed down my face. "And I never got to thank you. I never got to tell you how grateful I was." Arthur squeezed my hand. His shoulders shook. "Helen wanted to see Max so badly," Arthur whispered. "Those last few years. But she was afraid you'd turn her away. She used to come here sometimes. She'd sit outside in her car and watch him through the window. Just to see him smile." My heart broke. "Oh, Arthur. Hannah, she loved you. She was so proud of what you became. A successful businesswoman. A wonderful mother. She told me the week before she died that helping you was the best thing we ever did. We sat there holding hands and crying. For Helen. For lost years. For chances we'd missed. What happened with Peter? I asked finally. Raymond said he destroyed your restaurant. Arthur's expression hardened. Peter got involved in the business after you left. He made terrible investments. Spent money we didn't have. By the time Helen and I realized what was happening, the debt was massive. We tried to save the restaurant, but the damage was too deep. We lost everything. And Peter? He left. Disappeared right after the bankruptcy. We haven't heard from him since. Arthur's voice was bitter. He took what he wanted and walked away. Just like he did with you and Max. I'm so sorry, Arthur. Don't be sorry for us. We made our choices. Arthur looked at me with fierce intensity. But you, Hannah. You took the chance we gave you and made something beautiful. You proved that kindness isn't wasted. That hope matters. I stood up and hugged him. Arthur held on tight, this broken man who'd sacrificed so much for me and Max. I want you in our lives, I said firmly. Max needs his grandfather. And I need you too. Arthur pulled back and looked at me with wonder. You mean that? Every word. No more hiding. No more guilt. Arthur, your family. He smiled then. The first real smile I'd seen from him. It transformed his face, made him look 10 years younger. I'd like that very much, Arthur said. I'd like that more than anything. Arthur started coming by the cafe regularly after that. Not every day, but often enough that Max began to recognize him. I hadn't told Max yet who Arthur really was. I wanted to wait for the right moment. That man is here again, Max said one afternoon. He was doing his homework at our usual corner table. The one who came in a few weeks ago. Arthur waved from across the room. Max waved back, a little shy but friendly. He seems nice, Max said. Is he a friend of yours? Sweetheart, something like that. I watched them look at each other. Grandfather and grandson. Max didn't know the truth yet, but Arthur did. The longing in Arthur's eyes was almost too much to bear. My heart ached with the weight of it. 3 weeks into this new routine, something changed. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The lunch crowd had thinned out. Jen was wiping down tables. Max was reading a book in the corner. Arthur had left an hour earlier. The door opened. A man walked in. I knew him instantly, even though 9 years had passed. Peter Winslow. My ex-husband. Max's father. Peter looked good. Too good. Expensive suit. Designer watch. Hair perfectly styled. He'd always been handsome, always charismatic. That was part of the problem. Peter knew how to charm people. He just didn't know how to stay. He spotted me behind the counter and smiled. That same confident smile that used to make my heart race. Now it just made my stomach turn. Hannah, Peter said. The cafe looks amazing. I didn't smile back. What are you doing here? Can't a man visit his ex-wife's business? Peter glanced around, taking in everything. The customers. The decor. The success. I heard you were doing well. Wanted to see for myself. Now you've seen it. You can leave. Peter's smile didn't falter. Still angry after all these years? I'm not angry. I'm busy. He nodded slowly, like he was considering my words. Then he turned and walked out without another word. Jen appeared at my elbow. Was that? Yes. He looks like Max. I know. Max hadn't noticed. He was absorbed in his book, completely unaware that his father had just been 10 feet away from him. I thought that would be the end of it. Peter had satisfied his curiosity. He'd go back to whatever life he was living now. But a week later, he returned. This time the cafe was busy. The afternoon rush was in full swing. Peter walked in like he owned the place. He found an empty table and sat down. He didn't order anything. He just sat there watching me work. Max was at his usual spot doing homework. He looked up when Peter sat down 2 tables away. Their eyes met. Max looked confused. Something in Peter's face shifted. Recognition maybe. Or regret. I walked over to Peter's table. You need to leave. I'm a customer, Peter said calmly. This is a public business. You haven't ordered anything. I'll have a coffee. Black. I wanted to refuse. But customers were watching. Jen was watching. Max was watching. I couldn't make a scene. I brought Peter his coffee. My hands were steady but my heart was racing. Nice kid, Peter said, nodding toward Max. He looks smart, just like me. Don't you dare. My voice was low and fierce. Hannah, that's my son. You gave up that right 9 years ago. Peter's charming facade cracked slightly. I made mistakes. You abandoned him. You stopped paying child support. You disappeared. I was young. Stupid. I'm different now. I don't care what you are now. Stay away from Max. Peter leaned back in his chair. I've been thinking about that, actually. About my rights as a father. Ice flooded my veins. What are you talking about? I heard something interesting recently, Peter said casually. From a mutual acquaintance. About money my father gave you. A lot of money. My blood went cold. $250,000, Peter continued. That's family trust, Hannah. Winslow money. And I think I deserve it back. That money was a gift. From Arthur and Helen to me. My father had no right to give away that much money without my knowledge. I'm his son. That money should have been mine. You destroyed their business, Peter. You bankrupted them. They had nothing left because of you. Peter's eyes hardened. I want the money back, Hannah. All of it. Or I'll take you to court. I'll claim parental rights to Max. I'll make things very difficult for you. The cafe felt too hot. Too small. I couldn't breathe. You wouldn't dare. Try me. Peter stood up. He dropped a $5 bill on the table. Think about it. I'll be back in a week for your answer. He walked out. The bell chimed. Customers went back to their conversations, unaware that my entire world had just tilted sideways. Jen rushed over. Hannah, what was that about? Not now. I looked at Max. He was watching me with worried eyes. I forced a smile. "Everything's fine, sweetheart." But everything wasn't fine. Peter was back. And he wanted to destroy everything I'd built. Again. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about Peter's threat. He wanted the money back. He wanted to use Max as leverage. The thought made me sick. By morning, I'd made a decision. I needed to tell Max the truth about Arthur. He deserved to know. And I needed Arthur's help dealing with Peter. I picked Max up from school that afternoon. Arthur was waiting at the cafe, just like I'd asked. Jen had the day off, so it was just the three of us. "Max, come sit down," I said gently. "We need to talk." Max set down his backpack. He looked between me and Arthur, confused. "Am I in trouble?" "No, sweetheart. Nothing like that." I took a deep breath. "You know how I've told you that you have a father but he's not part of our lives?" Max nodded slowly. "Well, you also have a grandfather. Your father's father." Max's eyes widened. He looked at Arthur. "This is Arthur Winslow," I said softly. "He's your grandfather. He was married to your grandmother Helen. She passed away 3 years ago, but she loved you very much." Max stared at Arthur. Processing. Thinking? "You're my grandpa?" Max asked quietly. Arthur's voice was thick with emotion. "Yes. I am." "Why didn't you tell me before?" "That's my fault," I said quickly. "I didn't know Arthur wanted to be in your life. We lost touch for a long time. But he's here now. And he'd like to get to know you, if that's okay with you." Max looked at Arthur for a long moment. Then he smiled. "You seem nice. I liked you when you first came in." Arthur laughed, and it was the sound of joy breaking through pain. "I liked you too. From the first moment I saw you." They talked for an hour. Arthur told Max stories about Helen. About the restaurant they used to own. About how proud they were of Hannah. Max listened carefully, asking questions, slowly building a bridge to this grandfather he'd never known. I watched them together and felt hope. But then I had to address the harder truth. "Max, there's something else," I said. "Your father came to the cafe last week. Peter. He wants something from me, and it might get complicated." Max's face grew serious. "The man who was watching me. You noticed?" He looked at me weird. Like he knew me. "He does know you. He left when you were very small." "I don't want to see him," Max said firmly. "You're my family. And Arthur." He looked at his grandfather. "Right?" Arthur reached over and squeezed Max's hand. "Right." Later, after Max went home with a neighbor, Arthur and I talked seriously. "Peter wants the money back," I told Arthur. "He's threatening to take me to court. To fight for custody of Max." Arthur's face darkened. "He has no right. He's Max's biological father. He's nothing to that boy. He abandoned him." Arthur stood up and paced. "Hannah, I have documents. Papers from 9 years ago. When Helen and I gave you the money, we did it through the family lawyer. We made it clear on paper that the money went to Raymond Fuller's company, not directly to you. Raymond then chose to invest in your business. It was his decision as a business sponsor, not ours. I stared at him. Why did you do it that way? Protection. We knew Peter might come back someday demanding things. We wanted to make sure the money was legally untouchable. Arthur stopped pacing and looked at me. Peter can't claim that money, Hannah. It was never his. And it was never technically given to you as a gift. It was a business investment made by Raymond's company. Relief flooded through me. Are you sure? The lawyer has all the documents. Peter will lose if he tries to fight this. That night, Arthur contacted the Winslow family lawyer. Within 2 days, we had copies of everything. The paperwork was airtight. The money trail was clear. Peter had no legal claim. When Peter returned to the cafe the following week, Arthur was there. So was I. We handed him the documents. Peter read through them slowly. His face changed as he realized what he was seeing. "This is ridiculous," Peter said. But his voice had lost its confidence. "You manipulated this." "We protected Hannah," Arthur said firmly. "From you. Because we knew you'd try exactly this." Peter looked at me. Then at his father. Something crumbled in his expression. "I've lost everything, haven't I? The restaurant. Mom? You? Even my son. You made those choices," Arthur said quietly. "Not us." Peter set the papers down. For a moment, he looked genuinely lost. Then he walked out. The bell chimed. And I knew, somehow, that this was the last time I'd see him. Arthur put his arm around my shoulders. "It's over." "Yes," I whispered. "It's over." The weeks after Peter left felt like breathing for the first time in years. The threat was gone. The fear lifted. Max knew Arthur was his grandfather, and their relationship blossomed in ways that made my heart swell. Arthur came by the cafe almost every afternoon. He'd help Max with homework. They'd talk about baseball, science projects, books. Sometimes they'd just sit together in comfortable silence. Max had never had a grandfather before. Watching him discover what that meant was one of the greatest joys of my life. But something bothered me. Arthur still looked tired. Worn? He wore the same clothes every week. When I asked where he lived, he was vague. "A small place across town," he'd say. Nothing more. One evening, I asked Raymond Fuller to meet me. We sat at the cafe after closing. "I want to help Arthur," I told Raymond. "The way he helped me." "What did you have in mind?" "I want to give him money. Enough to get a decent place. Maybe close to us, so he can see Max more often." Raymond nodded slowly. "That's generous, Hannah." "It's not generous. It's fair." I looked at the cafe around me. Everything I have exists because of him and Helen. It's time I gave something back. "What about the second cafe? You were planning to expand." "That can wait. Arthur can't." Raymond smiled. "Helen would be proud of you." The next day, I called Arthur and asked him to come to the cafe. When he arrived, I handed him an envelope. "What's this?" Arthur asked. "Open it." He did. Inside was a check. His face went pale. "Hannah, I can't accept this." "Yes, you can. You gave me everything 9 years ago. Now it's my turn. But you worked for this. You built your business. With your help. With your sacrifice. I took his hand. Arthur, you're living in some rundown apartment barely making ends meet. I know you are. Let me help you find a better place. Something comfortable. Something close to Max and me. Arthur's eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve this. You deserve everything. My voice was firm. You and Helen gave me a future. Let me give you one too. Arthur pulled me into a hug. He held on tight, this man who lost so much and given even more. Thank you, Arthur whispered. Over the next month, we found Arthur a small house 3 blocks from my place. It had 2 bedrooms, a tidy yard, and windows that let in morning light. Arthur moved in with almost nothing. I helped him furnish it. Max picked out curtains. It became a home. The second cafe could wait. This was more important. Arthur started picking Max up from school twice a week. They'd come to the cafe together. Arthur would help Max with homework while I worked. Sometimes they'd go to the park. Or the library. Or just walk around the neighborhood talking. Max flourished. He'd never had a male role model before. Now he had his grandfather, and the bond between them was beautiful to witness. Mom, Max said one evening at dinner. Arthur told me about Grandma Helen today. How she used to come watch me through the cafe window. My throat tightened. She loved you very much. I wish I'd known her. She knew you. That's what matters. Max nodded thoughtfully. Arthur said she would have liked you being successful. That it made her happy. It did, sweetheart. Do you think she'd be happy now? Seeing us all together? I smiled through tears. I think she'd be overjoyed. 3 months after Peter left, Daniel proposed to me. Daniel Ross had been in my life for 2 years. He was patient, steady, kind. He worked as an architect. He loved Max. And Max loved him. I said yes. We planned a small wedding. Just close friends and family. The cafe would cater it. Everything felt right. The morning of the wedding, I stood in my bedroom looking at myself in the mirror. White dress. Simple veil. My hands were shaking. There was a knock on the door. Arthur stepped in. He wore a navy suit. He looked healthy now. Rested. Happy? Hannah, you look beautiful, Arthur said softly. Thank you for being here. I wouldn't miss this for anything. Arthur paused. Helen would be so proud. Of everything you've become. Everything you've built. I couldn't have done it without you. You would have found a way. You're stronger than you know. I hugged him. This man who'd saved me. Who'd sacrificed. Who'd become family in the truest sense. The ceremony was perfect. Small and intimate. Daniel stood at the altar looking at me like I was the only person in the world. Max was the ring bearer, grinning from ear to ear. Jen was my maid of honor. And Arthur sat in the front row next to Max's empty seat. When Max finished his duties, he slipped into the chair beside his grandfather. Arthur put his arm around Max's shoulders. They watched the ceremony together, grandfather and grandson, smiling. I thought about inviting Peter. For a moment, I'd considered it. But then I decided against it. This day was about moving forward, not looking back. I did send Peter money through Arthur a week before the wedding. Enough to help him start over somewhere. Enough to show I held no bitterness. Arthur had delivered it personally. He told me Peter cried when he received it. Said thank you. Said he was sorry for everything. But he didn't ask to see Max. He knew he'd lost that right. I hoped Peter would find peace somewhere. He was still Max's father, biologically. I wished him well. But I didn't need him in our lives anymore. The reception was held in my cafe. We decorated it with white lights and flowers. Everyone danced and laughed and celebrated. Daniel held me close as we swayed to music. Happy? Daniel asked. More than I ever thought possible. I looked around the room. At Jen dancing with Raymond Fuller. At Max showing Arthur something on his phone, both of them laughing. At customers turned friends raising glasses in our honor. This cafe had been my salvation. My fresh start. My proof that kindness matters and hope endures. But it was more than that now. It was where my family gathered. Where Arthur reconnected with his grandson. Where Max learned what it meant to be loved unconditionally. Arthur caught my eye across the room. He raised his glass to me. I raised mine back. We'd come full circle. From loss to healing. From strangers to family. From secrets to truth. Later that night, after the guests left, I stood in the empty cafe with Daniel, Max, and Arthur. We were cleaning up, laughing about funny moments from the wedding. Mom, Max said suddenly. This was the best day ever. I pulled him into a hug. Sweetheart, for me too. Do you think Grandma Helen was watching? Arthur smiled. I know she was. Daniel put his arm around me. Arthur ruffled Max's hair. We stood there together in the quiet cafe, surrounded by the remnants of celebration. I thought about everything that had brought us to this moment. Peter's betrayal. The divorce. The struggle. Arthur and Helen's secret gift. The years of hard work. The cafe's success. Arthur's return. The truth revealed. Peter's threat and departure. And now this, a new marriage, a healed family, a future bright with possibility. Forgiveness had given us this. Not forgetting, but forgiving. Letting go of bitterness. Choosing love over resentment. I'd forgiven Peter by sending him money. I'd forgiven Arthur for staying away. Most importantly, I'd forgiven myself for the years I spent believing I was alone. I wasn't alone. I never had been. Helen and Arthur had been watching over me from the beginning. And now Arthur was here, part of our daily lives, giving Max the grandfather he deserved. Ready to go home? Daniel asked gently. I looked around my cafe one more time. This place that had changed everything. Yes, I said. I'm ready. We walked out together into the cool evening air. Max held Arthur's hand on one side and Daniel's on the other. I walked beside them, my heart full. Tomorrow the cafe would open again. Life would continue. But tonight, we were simply family. Connected by loss and love, by sacrifice and second chances. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more heartwarming stories to enjoy.